Keanu Reeves stepped onto the shining stage in Dubai. His black suit simple but elegant, his face calm, not showing any emotion. He was invited as a surprise guest speaker at a grand tech summit, where billionaires, top CEOs, and famous influencers had gathered. Everyone was expecting flashy presentations, jokes, or business advice. Instead, they got Keanu quiet, kind, and thoughtful. Some people in the crowd didn't hide their confusion. Whispers began spreading through the crowd as soon as Keanu walked in. A few chuckled quietly. One man in a sharp silver suit leaned toward his friend and said, "Why is an actor talking at a tech summit?" Another laughed softly. "Is he going to show us kung fu or talk about robots?" Their words were meant to be private, but the disrespect hung in the air. The host, a famous Dubai businessman, welcomed Keanu with a strange smile. He said, "Please welcome the Hollywood mystery man, the quiet one. The guy who barely talks in his movies, Mr. Keanu Reeves." The audience gave a small applause, mixed with confusion and mild amusement. A few clapped only because everyone else was doing it. Some had already picked up their phones, expecting a boring talk. But Keanu didn't react. He simply nodded, stepped up to the microphone, and looked across the room. His eyes scanned the massive audience slowly, not rushing, not speaking. There was something different about his silence. It wasn't nervous, it was strong. People noticed Dot for a few long seconds. No one said a word. The room grew quiet, unsure what would happen next. Then Keanu leaned forward just a little and said, "Thank you for having me. I'll try to make my time here meaningful." His voice was soft but steady, and the sound echoed in the large hall. He paused again, then continued, "I know what some of you might be thinking. What is he doing here? Or maybe, why would we listen to a movie guy talk about business, tech, or life?" A few people smiled nervously. He was reading their thoughts out loud. "But let me share something," he said. "I wasn't always on big screens. I wasn't always known. I wasn't always understood." The crowd leaned in slightly. Something about the way he spoke, gentle, slow, with no need to impress, caught their attention. "I was born in Beirut," he began, "but my life moved fast and far. My father left when I was very young. We moved to Canada. I had trouble in school. Words would twist and run from me when I tried to read. I couldn't keep up with others. I was different. I was slow." He paused. No one laughed now. Phones were slowly put away. "I didn't shout for help," he said. "I didn't know how to, so I watched, I listened. I learned in silence." A man in the second row, who had earlier smirked at Keanu's entrance, was now fully focused. There was something deeply real about what was being said. No acting, no clever tricks. Keanu took a breath. Later in life, people still saw me as slow, too quiet. Not the loud, exciting type. And when I went to Hollywood, they told me, "You need to talk faster, be louder, be more charming." But I couldn't fake it. I didn't know how to become someone else. The hall was quiet. No jokes now. The people who had come for business secrets or flashy performances were hearing something they didn't expect: truth. And yet, Keanu continued, "I worked hard. I listened more than I spoke. And somehow, that became my strength." He looked around again. You see, in the world of power, noise is common. But silence is rare. And silence holds truth. Now the crowd was leaning forward. His words were simple, but they carried weight. CEOs who spent their lives talking and leading now sat silently, listening to a man who had once been mocked for saying too little. A woman in the back whispered to her friend, "He's not acting. This is really him." Keanu smiled slightly and said, "So why am I here? Maybe it's not to tell you how to run a company. Maybe it's to remind you that being human comes first. That stillness is not weakness. That kindness is not failure. And maybe, just maybe, being quiet isn't something to fix, it's something to protect." Someone in the front row began clapping slowly, moved by the moment. Others followed. Within seconds, the room that had laughed at him when he walked in was now clapping, some even standing. Keanu didn't ask for it. He didn't expect it, but he had earned it. He nodded once more, stepped back from the mic, and simply said, "Thank you," before sitting down. And in that moment, everything changed. The people who had mocked him now saw him differently. He didn't fight them. He didn't shout. He didn't try to impress. He just told the truth. And the truth made everyone stop, think, and feel. This was not just a speech. It was a wake-up call. And it had only just begun. Keanu sat on the stage chair, calm and relaxed. The Dubai audience, once unsure, now leaned forward. His simple words had already touched something inside them. No jokes, no big gestures, just quiet truth. The host looked surprised too. He wasn't expecting Keanu to hold the room like this. After a short pause, Keanu spoke again. "I want to tell you a story from when I was a boy," he said, looking out at the audience. "A time when I didn't understand the world, and the world didn't understand me." He smiled gently, like he was remembering something far away. "When I was young," he continued, "I lived with my mom and my sister. My father had left. He was gone. We didn't know where. So we moved a lot from Lebanon to Australia, then to New York, and finally Canada. Every time I got used to a place, we had to leave. Every time I made a friend, I had to say goodbye." People in the audience nodded. Many had grown up moving around. They knew that feeling of never settling, of always starting over. "In school," Keanu said, "I struggled. I couldn't read like the other kids. The letters danced on the page. They moved. I'd try to read a sentence, and by the time I got to the end, I'd forgotten the beginning. Teachers thought I was lazy. Other kids thought I was dumb. I started to believe them." He paused. The room was silent again. I had something called dyslexia, but nobody knew it back then. I just thought I was broken. A soft murmur ran through the audience. A man in a business suit looked down at his notes and quietly closed his notebook. He was paying attention now fully. Keanu went on, "So I stopped talking in class. I didn't raise my hand. I didn't ask questions. I stayed quiet. And I watched people instead. I learned by watching their faces, their hands, their eyes. I started to understand people by their silences, not their words." He smiled again, more deeply this time. "I found peace in quiet places. The library, the hallway after school, the empty park benches. I didn't need to be heard, I just wanted to feel safe." A woman near the front wiped a small tear from her cheek. "She wasn't alone. One day," Keanu said, "my teacher asked me to stand up and read from a book. I froze, my hands were sweating. My heart was beating so loud, I could barely hear anything else. The letters were swimming in front of me. I couldn't do it." He paused. His voice stayed steady, but softer now. Some kids laughed. One boy shouted, "He can't even read." I just stood there, wishing the floor would open up and take me. A deep silence filled the room. No one moved, but, Keanu added, there was one girl in the class who didn't laugh. After school, she came up to me and gave me a paper. On it, she had written the sentence I had been asked to read. She wrote it in big, clear letters and said, "Try again." He smiled, looking down, as if seeing that memory clearly. That was the first time someone helped me without laughing. It didn't fix everything, but it changed something inside me. I realized maybe I wasn't broken. Maybe I just needed time. Patience, kindness. The audience stayed still. No one reached for their phones. No one whispered. They were listening deeply. "That's when I learned something I never forgot," Keanu said. "Not all help needs to be loud. Sometimes the quietest acts make the loudest changes." He looked up. "I never became the fastest reader. I still struggle sometimes, but I learned how to remember what people said. I became good at listening, really listening. A businessman in the middle row whispered to himself, "That's rare." Keanu continued, "When I started acting, I wasn't the best. I wasn't trained like others, but I had something else. I had attention. I noticed the little things. The way a person sighs when they're sad. The way someone avoids eye contact when they're hiding something. I used those things in my roles." He took a short pause. "I wasn't loud, but I was present." That line hit hard. The audience felt it. Present. A word that meant more now. Keanu's tone became warmer. "And maybe that's why I'm here. Not because I'm the smartest. Not because I'm the richest. But maybe because I know how it feels to be invisible and still choose to stand up." He looked around again. "You might not know this, but I used to be a janitor. I cleaned studios and shops to help my mom. I've worked as a builder too. Hammered nails, carried wood. I've done things with my hands, not just my face. And I've never forgotten those days." A few gasps came from the back. Some had no idea Keanu had ever done such work. "And all those jobs," he said, "taught me one thing. Every person matters. Every story matters. Even the quiet ones." Then he smiled again, humble, peaceful. "Some people speak to be heard," he said softly. "But I learned to listen to understand." And with that, the second part of his story came to an end, but no one moved. They wanted more. They weren't just hearing Keanu speak. They were feeling what he had lived. And in that Dubai hall, the quiet boy from Canada had everyone listening. Keanu sat quietly, waiting for a moment before continuing. The Dubai audience stayed silent, still thinking about his childhood story. Many of them had never seen a celebrity speak like this, not shouting, not trying to impress, but just telling the truth. The room felt different now, almost peaceful. He looked up and said softly, "Even when I got into movies, things didn't get easy. In fact, it got harder in some ways. People were surprised. They thought movie stars lived perfect lives. But Keanu didn't speak like someone who had everything. He spoke like someone who had seen both dark and light. When I got my first small acting roles," he said, "people said I was too quiet. They said I didn't have the energy for Hollywood. I didn't talk fast. I didn't show off. I just did my work." He smiled a little. "One director once told me, 'You look like you're thinking too much. Audiences don't want to think. They want action.' Another said, 'You're a ghost at parties, man. You don't laugh loud. You don't dance. You disappear.'" Some people in the crowd chuckled quietly, but it wasn't laughter at him. It was laughter of recognition. They had heard similar things before in their own lives, but I didn't want to fake being someone I wasn't. Keanu said, "I couldn't pretend to be loud. I couldn't pretend to be charming. That's not who I am." He paused for a moment. "I wasn't interested in being famous," he added. "I was interested in being honest." A young woman near the front whispered to her friend, "That's rare in actors." Keanu leaned forward a bit. "I didn't go to big parties. I didn't do interviews unless I had to. And I didn't hire people to fix my image. I let the work speak. Or, I tried to." The host on stage, who had earlier smiled in a joking way, now watched with serious eyes. Even he had underestimated Keanu. "But Hollywood doesn't like silence," Keanu said, looking around the crowd. "It likes noise. Big talk, big smiles. Fast words, people who can grab attention in 5 seconds." He gave a small smile, not bitter, just honest. "So I got called strange, distant. Some even said I was cold. But I wasn't cold. I was just quiet. I needed space to think. I needed time to feel." The room nodded slowly. Many people there, even those who built billion-dollar companies, could understand that feeling. "One time," Keanu said, reporter asked me, 'Why don't you ever try to be cool?' I said, 'Because cool is usually fake. And fake doesn't last.' People laughed softly, not because it was funny, But because it was true, he continued, so I kept working. I kept doing movies. Some failed. Some were hits. But I always showed up. I always gave my best. And slowly, people started to notice something. He looked out at the crowd. They didn't just see a character. They saw something real. A man who didn't try to sell himself. A man who wasn't chasing attention. He looked down for a moment and said, I once heard a crew member whisper, he's the only actor who says thank you to the lighting guys. That meant more to me than any award. There was something beautiful in that silence. Something pure. In time, Keanu said, what made me different became my strength, not because I changed who I was, but because I didn't. Now the energy in the hall had completely shifted. The same crowd that once laughed softly when he entered now hung on his every word. I'm not the smartest man, he said, and I've made many mistakes, but I never forgot who I was. Even when the world wanted me to be someone else. He looked directly into the audience and added, that's something I want you to remember. Don't change to fit in. Grow to stand out. A pause again. Everyone needed a second to take that in. Then he smiled and said gently, sometimes being kind in a cruel world makes you dangerous. That line hit hard. People looked at each other, nodding slowly. That sentence would be shared everywhere. He went on. I've seen people step on others just to rise. I've seen fake smiles in rooms full of rich people. But I've also seen janitors who shine brighter than any star. They work in silence, they live with respect, and they never ask for applause. Now everyone understood what Keanu stood for. Not power, not popularity, but dignity. And maybe that's why I'm here, he said. Not because I made the most money, not because I'm the loudest, but because I stood quietly in a noisy world. As he leaned back in his chair, the audience remained silent, not out of boredom, but out of respect. They weren't just listening to an actor anymore. They were learning from a man who had walked through fire with soft steps, who had been called slow, quiet, and strange, but never stopped being true. And they were ready to hear more. Keanu sat still on the stage, his hands resting calmly in his lap. The audience in Dubai had gone quiet, not because they were bored, but because they were moved. Every word he spoke was like a soft knock on the heart. He wasn't shouting, wasn't trying to prove anything, but somehow, everyone was listening. More closely than ever before. After a short pause, Keanu looked up again and began speaking in a softer tone. I want to talk about something personal now, he said, something that changed me forever. The audience leaned in. His voice carried sadness, but also strength. Many years ago, Keanu said slowly, I fell in love. Her name was Jennifer Syme. She was kind, full of light, and she made me feel peaceful. People listened carefully. This wasn't a movie story, this was real. Jennifer and I were expecting a baby, he said. We were excited. We were nervous. We bought little clothes. We picked a name. Keanu stopped for a moment. His eyes blinked slowly, as if he was remembering every detail. But our daughter was stillborn. 8 months, he said quietly. She never took a breath. The room was silent, a deep silence. Some in the audience lowered their eyes. Others clenched their hands tightly. Keanu continued, Jennifer and I tried to stay strong, but grief, it changes people. It changed us. We were both broken, in different ways. He took a breath. 18 months later, he said softly, Jennifer died in a car accident. She was gone. Some gasped. Others covered their mouths. Most had no idea this had happened to him. I lost my child. And then I lost her. Keanu said, there are no words for that kind of pain. The audience didn't move. Not one phone was out. Not one whisper. All eyes were on him. I didn't cry in front of anyone, Keanu said. I didn't go on TV and talk about it. I didn't ask for sympathy. I just disappeared for a while. He looked up again. I walked. A lot. I sat in parks. I watched people holding hands. I watched children laughing. And I asked myself again and again, why her? Why my baby? His voice didn't shake, but the pain was clear in every word. Some people say time heals everything, he said, but I don't agree. I think time teaches us how to carry the pain. We don't heal, we just grow stronger. People were visibly emotional now. Even the host on stage had tears in his eyes. I still think about her, Keanu said. Every birthday that doesn't come, every smile I never saw, every laugh I never heard. He looked straight ahead, his eyes steady, but I also learned something. Grief is love with nowhere to go. It means we loved deeply. And I would rather feel that pain than feel nothing at all. A woman in the audience covered her face with her hands. She had lost her husband last year. Keanu's words felt like they were meant for her. Keanu gave a small, sad smile. That pain made me softer, he said. Not weaker, softer. I began to notice other people's pain more. I started talking to strangers who looked lonely. I started giving without expecting anything back. He leaned forward slightly. I realized something powerful. Everyone is going through something. Every single person you meet is carrying a story you can't see. Now the audience was fully connected to him, not as fans, but as human beings. After Jennifer passed, he said, I didn't want cameras. I didn't want parties. I didn't even want movies. I just wanted to feel the world again. He paused, thinking carefully. I worked on a few films quietly. I kept my circle small. I started riding the subway again, alone. People saw me and said, he's strange. But I wasn't strange. I was just healing. Someone in the audience whispered, he's so honest. Keanu looked around the room. And here's the truth, he said. Pain doesn't make us less. It makes us more open, more human, more real. He pointed gently at the crowd, not accusing, but reminding. Some of you here have lost people. Some of you are still grieving. And maybe you feel like no one sees it. But I see it. I know that quiet hurt, that empty chair, that silent birthday, that missing voice. He gave a slight nod, almost like a prayer. But you're still here. You're still standing. And that makes you stronger than you think. There was no sound in the room, just soft breathing, a few sniffles. The feeling was heavy, but it wasn't hopeless. It was healing. Keanu sat back in his chair. Sometimes, he said softly, we go through pain not to become famous or rich, but just to become kind. He looked down for a moment, then back up. I didn't plan to talk about this today, but maybe someone needed to hear it. And with that, he fell silent. The audience didn't clap right away. No one wanted to break the moment. Then slowly, one by one, people stood. A standing ovation, but not for a performance. It was for his heart. In that moment, Keanu Reeves wasn't a movie star. He was a man who had lost everything and still chose to love, and that changed everything. Keanu sat quietly after sharing his most painful memories. The room in Dubai was still. No one spoke, no one moved. His words had touched something deep inside every listener. But even after all that pain, Keanu's face still looked peaceful, not broken, but calm. After a long pause, he spoke again. There's something I want to tell you, he said gently. Something I learned not from fame, but from silence. The audience listened closely, curious about what he would say next. When you've been through pain, Keanu said, you start to notice things others don't. You see sadness behind smiles. You feel tension in quiet rooms. You begin to read people, not just hear them. He smiled a little and leaned forward. I remember one day on a movie set. I was sitting alone during lunch. I saw one of the lighting guys drop his sandwich by mistake. He bent down, picked it up, brushed it off, and quietly walked away. Keanu paused. I followed him. I gave him my lunch. He was surprised. He said, "You're the star. Why would you give me your food?" I said, "Because I've been hungry too." The room was quiet, but the message was loud. I've never cared about titles, Keanu continued. Director, actor, driver, cleaner, we're all people, and we all matter. He sat back again and let the words settle. In Hollywood, he said, I saw many people treat others badly. Some shouted at assistants. Some ignored waiters. Some never even said thank you to the crew. But I couldn't live like that. I just couldn't. His voice remained calm, but strong. Respect is not about how loud you are. It's about how you treat people who can do nothing for you. That line hit the room like thunder, even though it was spoken softly. Keanu shared another story. Once, I was filming a movie, and one of the crew members had a sick child. He didn't tell anyone, but I saw him crying in his car during a break. He paused, remembering. I knocked on his window. I sat with him. I didn't say anything fancy. I just listened. Later, I paid for his child's treatment. I didn't do it for thanks. I did it because I could. The audience was silent, many now wiping tears from their eyes. Kindness doesn't have to be big, Keanu said. Sometimes it's just being there. Sometimes it's just seeing someone. A man in the front row, a CEO known for being tough, looked down at his own hands, thinking deeply. Keanu looked around the room. I've met people with millions who still feel empty, he said. And I've met people with nothing who smile every day. The difference isn't money, it's peace. He continued, and peace comes from knowing who you are and how you treat others. He gave a small smile and added, it's easy to impress people with cars, watches, clothes. But it's hard to impress them with silence, patience, and honesty. Now the audience was nodding. These were truths they hadn't heard in business books or leadership talks. Keanu leaned forward again. I started doing something many years ago, he said. Whenever I work on a movie, I learn the names of the crew, the people who carry the cameras, adjust the lights, clean the floors. I say good morning. I say thank you, and I mean it. A soft clap started in the back. It quickly grew, but Keanu gently raised his hand to pause it. I'm not saying this to be praised, he said. I'm saying it because the world needs more of this, especially in places like this. He looked directly at the front rows, where the richest guests sat. Success is not how much you own, he said. It's how you act when you own nothing. That sentence hung in the air like a truth too big to ignore. And silence, he continued, is not weakness. In fact, it can be the strongest thing in the room. He explained how in loud meetings, full of shouting voices, it's often the person who stays calm and quiet who is truly thinking. Noise doesn't mean leadership, he said. Stillness means control. A woman in the audience smiled and whispered, that's powerful. Keanu looked around once more. I know this talk today isn't full of business strategies or market secrets, he said. But I believe everything starts with how you treat people. Your company, your family, your world, it all reflects your values. He smiled warmly. I didn't come here to teach you something new. I came to remind you of something old. Something simple. Something human. He stood slowly, ready to leave, but before walking off, he looked at the audience and said, be the reason someone feels seen today. That's more powerful than any title you will ever carry. He gave a small bow and stepped back. The room stood up again. But this time, it wasn't just respect. It was love. In a summit full of power and money. It was the quietest man who left the deepest mark, and he had done it without shouting once. Keanu stood on the stage for a few more seconds, then slowly sat back down. The audience was still standing, clapping with full hearts. There was no music, no big screen behind him, and no dramatic voiceover. Just him, A man in a black suit, speaking simple words that cut deeper than any loud speech. As the applause settled, he picked up the microphone once more and looked at everyone with a calm smile. "I didn't expect a standing ovation," he said softly. "But thank you, truly." People smiled, many still wiping their eyes. A few looked embarrassed that they had doubted him earlier. Others looked inspired, like they were thinking about their own lives now. Keanu leaned forward. "You know," he said, "we live in a world that moves fast. So fast we sometimes forget to feel. We forget to stop, to breathe, to listen." He paused for a moment and let that sink in. "I used to rush too," he said, "rushing to fix pain. Rushing to be better. Rushing to make people like me. But one day I realized, peace doesn't live in speed. It lives in stillness." People in the front rows looked around slowly. It was true. This summit had been all about speed, fast ideas, fast results, fast success. And now here was Keanu, reminding them that maybe, just maybe, slow was the answer. "I remember filming The Matrix," he said. "Every scene was full of action, slow motion, fast fighting. But what people remember most is Neo pausing, breathing, and saying, 'I know who I am.'" He smiled gently. "That line wasn't just written for the movie. It's a message," he said. "Knowing who you are, that's the real power." The audience was silent. Even the staff at the back, who usually moved around quietly, had stopped to listen. Keanu looked across the big hall, making eye contact with many people. "I've been in rooms full of famous people," he said. "Rooms where everyone's trying to be the most important, the most loud. But I've learned, the person who listens, who observes, who speaks only when needed, that's the person people truly follow." He looked down at his hands and continued, "Silence is powerful. Because it makes people lean in. It makes people pay attention. It creates space for others to feel safe." A few nods went around the fun room. It made sense now why his words had hit so deeply. "I've also noticed something else," he said. "Stillness doesn't mean doing nothing. It means doing things with full presence, full heart." He leaned back slightly and added, "When you eat, eat. When you walk, walk. When you love, love. Don't rush through life like it's a checklist." A young man in the audience, maybe in his late 20s, closed his laptop. He had been typing notes earlier. Now he just listened with full attention. Keanu continued, "There's a story I've never told before. Years ago, I was walking down a street late at night. No cameras, no friends, just me. I saw a man sleeping on the sidewalk, cold, no blanket. I gave him mine." He paused. "He didn't say thank you. I didn't need him to, because kindness isn't a deal, it's a gift." That one line made people exhale softly. The truth was heavy but beautiful. "I'm not perfect," Keanu said. "I have made mistakes. I've lost my temper. I've said the wrong things. But I always try to come back to stillness, to balance." He looked around and added, "Many of you are leaders, business owners, creators, and I know the pressure you carry. The world expects you to be strong all the time. But I'll tell you a secret." The room leaned in. Real strength is not about showing no pain. It's about feeling it and choosing love anyway. The silence in the room was now emotional, deep, safe. "You don't have to be loud to be heard," Keanu said. "You don't have to be rich to give. You don't have to be perfect to matter." He took a breath. "I learned these things the hard way. Through loss, through mistakes, through years of silence. But I learned." One woman in the audience whispered to her friend, "This is the best speech I've ever heard." Keanu nodded gently. "I want to leave you with one thought," he said. "Tonight, when you go home, don't post another quote. Don't rush to turn this moment into content. Just sit, just breathe. And ask yourself, am I being true to who I am?" The lights above seemed softer now, like they too were listening. If "The answer is yes," he said. "Then you're already winning." He smiled, stood up again, and gave a small bow. The applause returned louder, fuller, but not wild. It was respectful. It was emotional. It was real. Keanu didn't wave. He didn't blow kisses. He just walked off stage slowly, nodding to the staff as he passed. The host returned to the mic, but even he looked changed. He paused, looked at the crowd, and simply said, "That was something we will never forget." And he was right. Keanu Reeves had come without slides, without a script, without a show, but he left with something more powerful than all of that: everyone's heart. As Keanu Reeves quietly walked off the stage, the entire hall remained still. The applause had faded, but the feelings he left behind stayed strong. People were not rushing to check their phones, not talking loudly, not going back to their business notes. Instead, many sat quietly, thinking deeply. Something had changed. Backstage, the event organizers were shocked. No one had expected this. Keanu wasn't even the main guest speaker. He was added late, almost as a favor. Some staff even wondered if he was the right fit for a tech and business summit. Now those same people stood with tears in their eyes, watching him leave the stage with quiet grace. A young female volunteer whispered, "He didn't try to impress." And yet he impressed us all. Keanu didn't stay for photos. He didn't go to the VIP dinner. He went back to his hotel, alone. No reporters followed. No interviews were planned. He didn't want attention. He had already given the world something more valuable: truth. But outside the event, something else was happening. Clips from his talk started going viral. People who were recording from their seats began uploading short videos online. One of the first clips to spread was when Keanu said, "You don't have to be loud to be heard." That simple line began trending in multiple countries. Then came the quote, "Kindness isn't a deal, it's a gift." That one made it onto posters, Instagram stories, even business presentations. By the next morning, hashtags like #Keanu in Dubai, #The Silent Speech, and #Kindness is Power were all over social media. Tech leaders who were present at the summit started writing about Keanu on LinkedIn. One CEO posted, "I've been to hundreds of leadership talks. I've studied business for 30 years. But what Keanu said in 30 minutes felt more honest than anything I've heard before." Another business owner shared, "After hearing Keanu, I spent the evening talking to my employees not about profit, but about peace." At a nearby university, a professor who had watched the speech live invited his students to discuss it the next day. "We're not just learning from books," he said. "We're learning from life," and Keanu just gave us a lesson in humanity. Even in homes far from Dubai, people sat in silence after watching his clips. A mother in India told her son, "This is how a man should speak." A young woman in Kenya tweeted, "I've never felt seen by a celebrity before. Until now." A grieving father in Canada wrote, "His words made me feel less alone tonight." Something rare was happening, something powerful. People weren't just talking about Keanu's movies anymore. They were talking about his heart. News outlets started picking up the story. Headlines like, "Keanu's quiet words stole the show at Dubai Summit," "The actor who spoke without selling anything," "Silence that roared," "Keanu's unexpected masterclass in humanity." Everywhere, the reaction was the same. People felt changed. And not just inspired, but humbled. A famous influencer who had mocked Keanu at the start of the event tweeted, "I judged too quickly. I laughed when he walked on stage. Now I'm replaying every word he said. I was wrong." He was right. Even big-name speakers who had been scheduled before and after him admitted something special had happened. One said, "I had graphs, jokes, and fancy slides. But Keanu had silence, and silence won." Another admitted, "I was next on stage after Keanu. I almost canceled. No one wanted to hear numbers after hearing truth. The event's closing speaker, a world-famous economist, started his talk with this line: "Before I begin, let's take a moment to thank Keanu Reeves for reminding us what being human really means." Keanu, meanwhile, stayed quiet. He didn't post anything about the event. He didn't share clips or quotes. He didn't even do an interview. He simply flew home. And that, too, became part of the story. The man who shook an entire global summit, with his words, didn't need to say anything more. Instead, others spoke for him. In the weeks that followed, charity donations increased from people who said Keanu's talk inspired them to give. Workers at tech companies began organizing kindness circles where employees could simply listen to each other. Even one Dubai billionaire quietly donated money to a janitor's family, saying, "Keanu opened my eyes." One small startup, led by a woman in her 20s, changed their company rulebook. The first line now read, "Be like Keanu, kind in power, silent in strength, present in pain." And slowly, across boardrooms, schools, homes, and hearts, something beautiful spread. Not a trend, not a product, but a reminder that in a world full of noise, it's the quiet voices that stay the longest. Keanu didn't teach people how to make money. He reminded them how to be human. And that, more than anything, was what the world needed. Weeks had passed since Keanu Reeves spoke at the Dubai Tech Summit. But the impact of his simple, quiet speech had not faded. In fact, it was still growing. Across the world, people continued to share clips, quotes, and personal stories inspired by that day. They didn't call it a performance. They called it a moment of truth. In schools, teachers played the video during morning assemblies. They wanted their students to learn something more important than math or science: kindness. In offices, managers started meetings by asking, "How is everyone really feeling today?" They weren't just asking about work, they were asking as humans. Even in cafes and street corners, people whispered about Keanu's words. "He spoke like he was one of us," a woman said to her friend in New York. "He reminded us that success isn't everything." A shop owner in Tokyo told a customer. A new nickname started to appear online: the man who whispered to the world. People used it with respect. They had seen so many loud voices on the internet, but Keanu had done the opposite. He didn't try to go viral. He didn't want attention. Yet the world listened. A quiet voice had done what shouting could not. One day, a popular podcast host said, "I watched Keanu's Dubai speech 5 times. Not because it was flashy, but because it felt honest. Like he was speaking just to me." Another said, "He didn't just change the mood in that room. He changed people's hearts." And then, something surprising happened. A short documentary, titled "The Silent Speech," was released on YouTube. It was made by a young filmmaker who had attended the Dubai summit. The film showed Keanu's speech, but also added interviews with audience members, organizers, and even hotel staff who met him behind the scenes. The video went viral within hours. In the documentary, one of the lighting crew said, "He remembered my name. That's all. But I'll never forget it." A hotel worker shared, "He thanked every person who served him tea or cleaned his room. No one does that here. No one." The film ended with this quote from Keanu's speech: "You don't have to be rich to give. You don't have to be loud to lead. You just have to care." Millions watched the documentary. Some cried, some sat in silence. Some messaged their loved ones just to say, "I love you." That's the kind of ripple his words had created. Back in Los Angeles, Keanu remained quiet. He didn't talk about the speech. He didn't try to sell anything from it. He went back to his simple life, riding the subway, walking alone, and filming small projects. But people noticed him differently now. One fan met him at a bookstore and said, "Thank you for what you said in Dubai." Keanu simply nodded and sighed, "Thank you for listening." Another fan asked him, "How did you stay so calm when they laughed at you at first?" Keanu smiled gently and replied, "Because I know who I am." And their laughter didn't change that. That one sentence became another quote shared online thousands of times. Even business schools began using his speech in leadership lessons. Professors explained how emotional intelligence, humility, and stillness were powerful tools in a world chasing speed and fame. One professor said, "Keanu showed us something we rarely teach: how to lead with the heart." Soon, the organizers of the Dubai summit were flooded with emails. People asked them to bring Keanu back. Others asked if there was a way to watch the full speech. Some just wanted to say, "Thank you." One of the organizers said in an interview, "We brought him in as a guest, but he became the soul of the event." Later, when the summit released a printed magazine of all guest speakers, Keanu's section was titled, "The Whisper That Changed the Room." Inside, they printed one last quote from him: "Be the reason someone feels seen today." That's more powerful than any title you will ever carry. That line stayed with everyone. It stayed with the janitor who now walked with pride, knowing he mattered. It stayed with the young girl who stopped hating her soft voice. It stayed with the CEO who began asking his workers about their families. It stayed with the world. And the most beautiful part? Keanu never asked for praise. He didn't post a tweet. He didn't do an interview. He didn't write a book about it. He just continued living. Quietly, kindly, and truly. In a world full of noise, Keanu had reminded everyone of something simple: that you don't have to raise your voice to raise the world. And the world finally listened.